The other compelling part of it for me as a sports writer was that the team was supposed to be really good that year. They were number one in preseason. They had a lot of players coming back from a team that had had a very good season the year before. And so I persuaded Coach Cox to let me embed with the team. And that was a point of great, trust for him. I appreciated him for trusting me that much and allowing me to follow the fortunes of the team, and at the same time also spend time illuminating Little Rock's history, the unknown history surrounding the integration crisis.
Hello, and welcome to Meet the Author. I am Derek Cash with the North Little Rock Public Library System, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to a writer whose work captures the complexities of race, community, and the enduring spirit of an American city. Joining us today is esteemed author and journalist Jay Jennings to discuss his book, Carry the Rock, Race, Football, and the Soul of an American City. Jennings' narrative is more than about football. It is a profound exploration of the intersection between race and identity in a community with a storied past. Through intense research and compelling storytelling, Jennings illuminates the struggles and triumphs of a football team and a city, revealing deeper truths about our society. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Jay, for being here on this program. I really appreciate this.
Thank you for having me.
All right, okay. The first question I think probably everyone is interested in is, why did you write this book?
Well, it was partly personal and partly professional. I'd been working in New York as a sports writer and editor for magazines for about 20 years. And then in 2007, my mother passed away from Little Rock originally, and my father was on his own here. So I was casting around for a project that would bring me back to Little Rock where I could spend more time with him. So, of course, the anniversary of the 2007 of the integration crisis at Central High was the 50th anniversary was coming up that year, and I thought maybe there's something I could say about that hadn't been said before. So with the famous book Friday Night Lights in mind, I contacted Coach Bernie Cox at Central High and asked if he would mind if I followed the team through that year and spent time at the school during all that 50th anniversary, the events that were going on. The other compelling part of it for me as a sports writer was that the team was supposed to be really good that year. They were number one in preseason. They had a lot of players coming back from a team that had had a very good season the year before. And so I persuaded Coach Cox to let me embed with the team. And that was a point of great, trust for him. I appreciated him for trusting me that much and allowing me to follow the fortunes of the team, and at the same time also spend time illuminating Little Rock's history, the unknown history surrounding the integration crisis, which of course had been written about a lot.
I have so many things. I like this book immensely. There's so many things I want to ask you. And in my mind, I think if this is the order that I want to ask them. But you brought up something in that last answer that I want to ask, but I'm going to jump and immediately ask it. What did the high school players and the coaches think about the book? How did they feel about knowing that you were going to write about them?
Well, like I said, the trust from Coach Cox was essential to that. And originally I thought, as with Friday Night Lights, that I would, spend more time with the players, that those would be the families I would get to know. And what became apparent to me as the season progressed was that the story, to me, the most interesting story was the coaches and the way they dealt with the players they had then, their past histories, which were very fascinating. Maybe it was because I was older, I related to them more, and they were a range of people too. There were different races, ages, and political points of view, and also I just spent a lot more time in the coach's office, listening to them sort of hash out the problems with the team, talk about the anniversary commemorations that were going on, and airing their feelings. And as with any journalist who kind of embeds with any organization, eventually you just become part of the furniture, and people open up more than you might expect them to. They also, I think, trusted me and knew my work previously, and because of what they knew about me and what they learned about me during the season, they gained trust in me, and I was very happy about that and proud of that.
Were there any challenges to writing this book, or were there any surprises or disappointments?
Originally, when I, started, I thought this was going to be a great, that Disney would pick it up, because the team would go undefeated, go to the state championship, and everybody would hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and everything would be okay. And as it happened, it was the season, they struggled during the season. There was a lack of unity. There were a couple of players who were suspended for various infractions. And what that did, I think, rather than having a Disney version, that really brought out the character of the players and the coaches more, because they had to struggle. And I think that, as a narrative, is much more interesting than the undefeated season. As much as they may have wanted a happy ending, as much as they tried to get one, it was those struggles that they faced during the season that I think, told me more about character, more about, what coaches can do, what effect they can have, and what struggles they have too. So it was a better book, I think, because the season was a struggle.
Well, it's an interpretation I would have never thought, but listening to you and your analysis, I think you're probably correct. Yes. Because your book, it is about football, but it is also about the history of segregation at Central High and in Little Rock. What has been the reaction or the impact of your book now that it's been published for a few years? Yeah.
Yeah. There were some people, I think, who were not, happy with it, but I think because of the time I grew up, and I was born in 1957, and my parents never talked about race or talked about the Central High crisis, and I think that was a prevailing view in Little Rock for a long time, that you just didn't talk about the unpleasantness. So publishing a book like this, brought up some difficult feelings for people. But I think, as my own view was, that this kind of stuff, we need to talk about it, and we need to talk about it and find venues to talk about it, where it's not just this crisis that's sort of fenced in, that you can say, oh, that happened and now we'll move on. So I think what my book adds to all of the literature of the race relations in Little Rock is putting it in a greater context, not just in sports, but across the decades, from the lynching, the horrible lynching of John Carter in 1927, and only 30 years later, people are saying it's so surprising that that this would happen in Little Rock, the Central High crisis, when there were people alive in 57 who vividly remembered that lynching. So, and that was a an incident that a lot of people had forgotten about or thought it was ancient history. And then the whole busing and integration crisis, private schools. I was bused to, across town when I was in middle school. That was also a fraught period in the city's history that, revolved around race relations, that people tended to separate from the crisis. And so I think my book adds a continuum to the idea of race relations in Little Rock.
You sort of, in fact, not sort of, you deliberately brought up John Carter. I was going to ask you to talk about him a little bit, and Lonnie Dixon, because they're well talked about in your book.
Right. I knew that the book would be more than a story about, just a sports team from the very beginning. But when I began to read more about the John Carter lynching and some of the, what went on during the, flooding of 1927, which is also a big event, and the sort of racial tensions that came to the surface, regarding Lonnie Dixon, who you mentioned, who was, accused of raping a white woman. It was a young black man, and that preceded the lynching of John Carter. He was arrested and jailed, but it sort of inflamed a mob in the city that ended up, taking John Carter's life. Not a lot had been written about. Some scholars had looked at the John Carter lynching before, but never put it, I think, in a sort of narrative context as my book did. And that sort of laid the foundation for, the tension in race relations that came after, in the decades after even.
Okay. You bring up in the book McClellan High School, and it shows how whites moved to create new school districts. And I don't want to, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but what do you think of Little Rock today as not necessarily as a result, but what in terms of, let's say, race relations, school relations, that sort of thing? Because you've lived here now for many years. Yeah?
Right. Well, I have a 5-year-old daughter who is also who's in public school system now, and so I think a lot about what kind of education she's going to get, and I think the Little Rock, as I mentioned in the book too, is still true today. That Little Rock has avoided some of the dramatic segregation or flight to the suburbs and flight to public school or private schools that has been present in places like Memphis and Shreveport, comparable cities, Birmingham, because of the excellence of, in particular, Central High. There are, many people who move to Little Rock for various reasons, whether it's to work at UAMS or to in industry or banking, who are, great with sending their kids to Central High because it has such a sterling academic reputation. And I think that has sort of filtered down to the other schools to help them be, retain a diverse population, a more diverse population than you'll find elsewhere in the South.
Not necessarily a large, but a significant portion of your book deals with the school boards and how at one time it was all white, and then gradually African Americans were elected, and now, or at least when you written the book, they were a majority. And comment on that and just the struggles that took place with the board members, et cetera.
Yeah, there were a couple of tension-filled elections, let's say, during the time I was the year I was writing the book and researching the book, and some people in the aftermath have accused me of being like very anti-Democrat Gazette, because they came out with editorials that were the Democrat Gazette is a great paper, a great daily paper. The education reporting is very fair and balanced. Cynthia Howell, I used a lot of her work as I was researching the book, but the editorial page could get very caustic and divisive, in my opinion. So they tended to highlight the differences in the board and how the board was more interested in personal grievance than and actually caring about the benefit for the children. And that message, even though it may have been happening at a very low level, got amplified during that year. They also had a series, the Little Rock School District had a series of controversies with their superintendents who, one was out for plagiarism, one was fired for plagiarism on his thesis. Others had very troubled tenures. So there's been, a little more stability in recent years, and I think that's been a good thing. This time period of 2007, 2008 seemed to be when tensions were at their highest on the school board.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go back now to football. Something that you brought up that I thought I chuckled when I read it. You said that Central was an international studies magnet school, and they used it to get athletes they wanted. I thought of the high schools in West Texas, that they will literally take some of their high school seniors and flunk them so they can stay another year, so they can maybe win a state championship. And I just thought, it's the same all over if you love football.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. My father graduated from Little Rock, then Little Rock High in 1939. And I said, "Did you ever think about playing football?" And he said, "Those guys were professionals." He said there were some 22-year-old guys on the high school teams, and Central, of course, had great football teams back then. But that's just a way of saying that, this sort of undercurrent of schools recruiting and between private schools and public schools, that it's always gone on. It's not a new phenomenon.
Yeah.
But it was fierce during that year because Pulaski Academy had a very good team, and the coaches were very opinionated about, players who they thought that the private schools were poaching from the public schools. And it's an issue that, remains today. I think there's a lot of movement of the best players, among both public and private schools.
I didn't know probably any of the people that you wrote about in this book, and I've learned a lot. But someone I really came to like was Coach Bernie Cox. He had a great attitude about the way the athletes should behave, their grades, etc. Just talk about him for a few minutes, if you're willing. I just thought he was a great person.
Yeah, he's obviously the centerpiece of the book, and he put a lot of trust in me to get the story right. When I started out, he said, "Look, I know there may be some things that happen this year that I don't want you to write about, but you have to do your job, and I'm going to trust that you do it and stick by your standards, and I'm not ashamed of anything we do here. So I just, I trust you to be fair to us, even if some things happen that I don't want you to write about. I know you have to do your job." And that was a real gift. So he was definitely a no BS kind of guy. And I think the players, they didn't always like him for that, but they certainly respected him. And there's the scene in the book, that my favorite scene, where a player who'd been suspended is sort of welcomed back onto the team after his suspension. They lost a big game when he was out. He was probably the best player on the team. And when he came back and to practice the first day, he asked Bernie if he could address the team. And he apologized for his behavior and, said that he hoped that the team would forgive him and welcome him back. And that moment, I think, in the season was Bernie Cox's favorite moment. None of the games that they won at the last second, the games they lost the last second, he was most moved by the emergence of that man as a young man, I think, than anything that happened on the field. Yeah. And that's what I loved about Bernie.
Yeah, it seems like he was really interested in character building. Yes. And so, yes, I enjoyed reading about him, and just, you think like you'd like to meet this person. So I just had to be sure to ask you about him. Yes.
Yes. Okay. He's very, very wryly funny too, in his own way. And I really enjoyed spending some time with him.
Do you think will you be writing any more books? Have you written any more? I didn't do any research on that. Have you written any more books since this one?
That's the first, or the most recent standalone book that I have done. My time since then has been spent sort of working on the career of Charles Portis, the author of True Grit. 3 years after that, in 2013, when my book was originally published, I edited a collection of his magazine work and other writings that hadn't been collected before. And then most recently, last year, his collected works came out from the Library of America series, and I edited that also. So that's been a great pleasure, because it's editing is easier than writing.
Oh yes, yes, it is.
And I got to spend all this time with the works of a man who I really respect as a writer, and you learn so much by reading that closely, and so that's been a great pleasure, and part of the way I've spent most of my career since that book was published.
If people want to buy this book, where can they buy it?
Your local independent bookstore is the first place I would go. Wordsworth Books here in Little Rock, in the Heights. They've been very good hosting events and stuff for local authors and me as well. And then of course it's available online through Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and there's also an independent bookstore listed on my website, jjennings.net. There's links to buy it from various sources, and of course the University of Arkansas Press. You can just go there and they'll be happy to send you a copy.
What was it like writing for the University of Arkansas Press?
They were fantastic with this edition. First of all, I was very flattered that they would want to sort of republish this book that had appeared, a decade before, and they thought it had enough lasting value that they would go to the trouble of reissuing it. And then, to my benefit, I got, as people have written to me throughout the years, I've discovered several mistakes that I made in the original edition that I was able to correct in here. I wrote a new introduction to the book that's, sort of brings people up to speed from what happened from 2007 until 2023. And the editors were just so meticulous and wonderful to work with there.
Well, it's a fine book. It really is. Jay, if people want to contact you, are you in social media in any way?
I'm on what used to be Twitter at JayJenni.
Mm-hmm.
That's my handle. There's the website, and there are links to if you want to send me a note or something,
Mm-hmm.
or contact me. There's information on the website to do that.
All right. Well, it has been a pleasure having you. I've learned even more just listening to you that to help with the book. So I really appreciate your being here.
Well, I appreciate what the library, the Lehman Library, does for its citizens, and I spent a lot of time in the library researching the book. So I'm flattered that you asked.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today. If you're interested in reading Carry the Rock, you can check it out from the library or purchase it wherever books are sold. Also, you can find more information at jjennings.net or our website, nlrlibrary.org. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day, everyone.